From Nathaniel Joseph to Martel Height, and finally Jabron Harvey. There's a lot of football recruiting talk to discuss on today's episode of the show. Let's get right on into it.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credentialed media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. This Monday edition of the show will be dedicated to football recruiting talk. We will start out by discussing highly ranked four-star wide receiver Nathaniel Joseph, a recent Clemson decommit, deciding to visit the Cardinals program this past weekend. We'll discuss what he could possibly bring to the table for this program. We will then transition into analyzing what the decommitment from four-star defensive back Martel Height means for this recruiting class. And then finally, we will end the show by discussing four-star defensive lineman Jabron Harvey cutting his list to 5 with the Cardinals making the list. We will start out by talking about Nathaniel Joseph. But before we do that, I do want to apologize for the big-time delay. I know that on a couple of the past episodes, I mentioned that there would be a break. Technically, the podcast is considered to be in the off-season through the months of June and July, but that does not mean that there will not be any content. There just won't be as many episodes as there usually are. So just a heads up that the rest of the month from here on out will be, heavy content days. So there will be shows pretty much at least once a day, Monday through Friday, up until the end of the month, at the end of next week. So I do want to apologize for the hiatus, but we are back, and the big-time football recruiting weekend, and actually the biggest football recruiting weekend in the University of Louisville Football's program history, has concluded. It seems like there was a ton of fun for the recruits. They got to go to Churchill Downs on Saturday night to witness Downs After Dark. They had dinner with the coaching staff and things of that nature on Friday night, where there were a lot of luxury vehicles like Lamborghinis and stuff like that, I think there was a Lamborghini. I could be wrong. They got some experiences with private jets and stuff like that. So it just seemed like through social media that there was a ton of fun for the recruits to have throughout this past weekend. But as I mentioned leading up to it over the past couple of weeks, that this was the biggest recruiting weekend in program history. I said that on the airwaves when I hosted the Mike Rutherford show last Tuesday, with Mike being out. And, I think that at that time there wasn't a confirmation on this, but since that, that radio show, four-star wide receiver Nathaniel Joseph had decommitted from Clemson and opted to visit the Cardinals program, regardless of, how possible, I guess you could say, of the Cardinals getting into this recruitment seriously and being, a possible landing spot. I think that's pretty self-explanatory when you consider the fact that he took a visit. But it seems like at this point, the talk around Joseph's recruitment, I think he's known as Ray Ray, is his nickname. The talk around Ray Ray's recruitment is that it's going to be tough to take him away from South Florida, Miami being a school in particular. It's going to be tough to take Joseph out of that area. The Clemson decommit, and I believe this is the case, that if you are committed to the Tigers program, you cannot take another visit if you are committed. So he ended up decommitting, tweeted out, earlier this past week that, Clemson is still in the running. But obviously, if you're reading the tea leaves, well, it seems like Joseph opting to take other visits obviously means that he might not necessarily be sold on Clemson, or even if he is, it seems like he wants to at least, exhaust all options, check off all the boxes, make sure that he's making the right decision. But regardless of how you spin it, the Cardinals getting a visit here this quickly is huge. The 105th best player, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings in the 2023 class. He is the 16th best prospect at the position, the 21st best in the Sunshine State. 5'8" wide receiver, 170 pounds, from Miami, Florida, a standout of Edison High School in South Florida. Like I mentioned, a ton of big-time offers, was committed to Clemson. Miami is in the mix. Texas A&M is another school to watch out for, holds a Alabama offer. It looks like he will be visiting Miami next weekend. So I think that that's kind of the big question mark surrounding his recruitment, right? Whether or not, he comes away from that visit next weekend uncommitted. I think that that's where, some of the concerns lie. And I think it's a very, very valid concern with him being a native of South Florida. The talk already being that it's going to be hard to take him away from the South Florida area. You do have to have some, caution and some skepticism of whether or not, Miami's going to be pushing hard for his commitment when he takes that visit coming up next weekend. In terms of who he is as a player, Andrew Ivins, the Southeast recruiting analyst for 24/7 Sports, last May projected him as a day 3 NFL prospect for, between the 4th and 7th round. His NFL comparison was, Ray McLeod, nickname Ray. It's only fitting that he's compared to a player like Ray McLeod, who, at Clemson was involved in a bunch of different packages, was kind of, I wouldn't necessarily call him a running back or a receiver, in terms of his primary position, because I felt like Dabo Swinney and company got him the ball in a handful of different ways. But Nathaniel Joseph, probably more of a true wide receiver. This is what Ivins had to say, and I quote, "A playmaking slot receiver with an elite burst that doubles as a dangerous return man. Can attack the flats and turn short little drive routes into long gains. Ability to quickly start/stop makes it difficult for defenders to corral him. Makes up for his smaller catch radius with his overall feel for the position, as he understands how to beat zone coverage and work for his quarterback." He goes on to say, tracks the ball well over his shoulder and owns rather reliable hands. Not much context available when it comes to top-end speed, but was able to break 4.2 in the short shuttle in the spring before his junior season, and has outran plenty of talented defenses under the lights down in South Florida. Has experience lining up in the backfield, and could be utilized on jet sweeps or quick swing passes following pre-snap motions. Will need to develop some core strength once he reaches the next level, as it won't be as easy to slip away from college-sized linebackers and safeties. Should, however, emerge as a multi-year contributor for a Power 5 program, given how he changes direction and releases from the inside, likely to compete for a spot right away on both punt and kick return. So, do I have to spell it out? With me reading that excerpt, it should be obvious to who that reminds you of. If you don't even hear a player's name, if I just were to randomly read you that excerpt, who comes to mind? What former Louisville player comes to mind? Tutu Atwell, a native of Miami, Florida. Went to the same high school that Teddy Bridgewater went to, came through the Louisville program, spent 3 years to where he really, really showed out. Basically did the things that Ivins has projected for Nathaniel Joseph. I think that being able to utilize as both a player in special teams, but also kind of as like a Swiss Army knife on the offensive end, right? So we've already seen how Scott Satterfield can game plan and style his offense, so to speak, around a receiver of that caliber, a smaller receiver that isn't necessarily overly strong, but has a ton of elusiveness, has a ton of, agility and acceleration. Once he touches the ball, you have to wonder if it's a house call. The home run ability every single time he touches the ball, one of those players that you have to know where he is at all times. There's so many comparisons, between Joseph and Tutu Atwell, and that's what kind of leads me to believe that, if you're Scott Satterfield and company, this past weekend, I would assume that the approach is, hey, Ray, I literally got a guy to the league that plays just like you, that you have very, similar tendencies to. We had a small receiver that came through here, played special teams, but I got him the ball in different ways: jet sweeps, swing passes, intermediate routes, slants over the middle, deep balls. I found a way to utilize Tutu Atwell's skill set in the best ability. Now you have an opportunity to come in with one of the best recruits, quarterback recruits in the country, in Pierce Clarkson, and possibly play right away. You could be a guy that competes for playing time right away. So I think that the pitch from Scott Satterfield and Lance Taylor is that, hey, we've had a guy that came through here literally just 2 years ago that you could be just like, and we could get you to the league, and you'll be able to, have a role like that. And we've utilized that skill set. But obviously it's going to depend on, what's going to happen after this June 24th weekend. Is he going to be on commitment watch? I feel better for Louisville's chances if Joseph either A, obviously commits before the visit, or B, does not come away from that visit to Coral Gables with a commitment looming. So it'll obviously be kind of one of those wait and see approaches in terms of this recruitment. But overall, just the fact that, he decommitted and immediately scheduled a visit to the University of Louisville is huge news for the program. So we'll transition over into, unfortunately, some disappointing news as the Cardinals received their first decommitment of the recruiting cycle. That is four-star defensive back Martel Hight. We will discuss what that means for the program and the recruiting class in general after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NHL playoffs and Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As always, I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Well, over the past couple weeks, it seemed like there was chatter that Georgia defensive back Martel Hight could be decommitting from the program. There, I think, is a rumor that a coach of his is now going to be on staff at Vanderbilt. So it seems like the Commodores are going to be the program in the lead. And he's gotten some crystal ball projections as of recently. So it seemed like the writing was on the wall when he decommitted from the program late on Sunday evening. The 5'11", 161-pound defensive back from Rome High School in Rome, Georgia, originally committed to the Cardinals program on that big recruiting weekend in January. And at the time, I believe that he was a mid 3-star level prospect. I could be wrong, so don't hold me to this, but I think he was in the top 600. Well, now he has definitely risen up through the rankings. Currently a composite 4-star according to 24/7 Sports Composite. He's a 3-star on 24/7 Sports, but in terms of the composite, the 365th best recruit in the 2023 cycle, the 36th best cornerback, and the 36th best prospect in the state of Georgia. So what does this mean for the Louisville football recruiting class as a whole and for the program moving forward? Well, currently, as you can see with how Satterfield address the defensive backs room in the transfer portal and at the end of the 2022 recruiting cycle, and now how he's continuing to make that a point of emphasis in Flyville 23 is that he's looking to completely overhaul the secondary for the University of Louisville, and as he should. You're possibly going to go through some number losses at the end of the season. Kentrell Clark is a guy that probably will end up going to the NFL. Kendrick Duncan Jr. is likely going to be gone. You're probably going to lose a guy like maybe MJ Griffin as well. And some of the graduate transfers will not be around for too long. So it's never too early to focus on the future here if you are Scott Satterfield, Brian Brown, Wesley McGriff, and company. The good news for the University of Louisville is that they already have a good amount of defensive backs committed. You have Aaron Williams, who is a potential lockdown cornerback at the next level, top 150 prospect, who leads your defensive backs recruiting. You also have some other defensive backs like you have, Jaden Davis, who is a safety from Swanee, Georgia. You have Jeremiah Collins, who is a quarterback/safety, and you also have Raekwon Adkins, who is rising up through the rankings as well. All four of them are inside of the top 800 in the recruiting cycle. So, I mean, it could be a lot worse. Obviously, it's not necessarily something that you can spin positively because, for good reason, Martel Hight saw his recruiting stock rise pretty significantly. So, you have to focus on that. But they do have 4 defensive backs committed, so it's not something that you're going to see a lot of desperation from the coaching staff. I'm interested to see what other names that the coaching staff goes after. Do they circle back around to a guy like Jayshon Frosto Ramos, the teammate of St. John Bosco High School quarterback Pierce Clarkson, or do they, possibly go after some different names? It seems like new names keep popping up for the University of Louisville in this recruiting cycle, so definitely one to keep an eye out on. But at the end of the day, it's a tough loss. I was really, really looking forward to Martell Height at the next level. He is a two-way player, plays wide receiver for Rome, actually two-way, but being recruited mainly as a defensive back. So you see that versatility. He could have also been a player that could have played offensively for the University of Louisville if Scott Satterfield and company saw that as a possibility. But overall, it sucks. It dropped the recruiting class from the top 10. Now I think it's ranked 15th in the 2023 cycle in the team rankings. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be something that I think that this program is going to dwell on. But I do think that they're going to still continue to recruit Martel Hight, hoping to maybe reconvince him to join the class at a later time. So that's going to be all the bad news that we have for this episode of the show. We're going to end the episode with some pretty solid news. Highly rated 4-star defensive end Jabron Harvey recently cut his list to 5. The Cardinals made that list. What does he bring to the table? We will discuss that here in the next segment. Obviously, if you are listening to this audio-wise, you are probably going to hear some implemented advertisements. If you are watching this on YouTube, obviously you will not. So be aware of that. But the final segment of the show will be dedicated to talking about the list cut of a top 4-star defensive end, Jabron Harvey, who is ranked as the 188th best prospect nationally in the 2023 cycle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 25th best edge rusher, and the 6th best recruit in the state of North Carolina. 6'3", 215 pounds from Durham, North Carolina, a standout of Southern High School. His list cut last week included the Cardinals, along with North Carolina, South Carolina, Wake Forest, and Oklahoma. Has a ton of offers. A lot from. Excuse me, I got the hiccups. He has a lot from the some big-time Power 5 schools. He recently was a part of that big official visit group over the past weekend. Matt McGavick of Louisville Report, Louisville Sports Illustrated site, posted his statistics in a post last week. 11 games of action last season, 129 total tackles, 54 of those were solo. 35 of those tackles were for a loss. And oh my goodness, 28.5 sacks. Had 8 pass deflections, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception. Simply put, those are video game numbers. There's one of two things. Either the competition might not necessarily be too great. I mean, Durham, North Carolina, you would think it's decent competition. Or Jabron Harvey is way underrated. But then again, he's ranked in the top 200. So obviously, scouts are pretty high on his potential. Brian Doan, the national recruiting analyst of 24/7 Sports, back in February projected him as a Power 5 starter. He had this to say about Jabron Harvey: verified size with length, has frame and skill set for edge rusher, will be able to play at 230 pounds. Incredibly productive player with 28 sacks, 129 tackles as a junior. Plays both sides of the ball in various roles at Southern. High-level athlete with excellent burst at snap. Twitchy prospect, gets off quickly and stays low while eating up space in first few steps. Plays standing up and with hand on ground, has motor and works to fight through double teams. He goes on to say, changes direction well and chases down plays on backside. Timing and anticipation of snap are excellent, shows closing speed and body control. Uses a swim move at times, especially when fiending outside and moving inside. Has to continue to develop in the weight room. Relies heavily on physical talent, but must refine technique. At times, loops to the backfield rather than dipping shoulder and exploding toward ball carrier. Has to show he can be consistent in stacking and shredding when ball is run at him. Has athleticism to drop into coverage, but needs to work on technique of it. Multi-year starter at top 20 Power 5 program. Size could keep him from being a high NFL draft pick, but has NFL draft potential. When I watch Harvey play at 6'3", 215 pounds, not necessarily from a size perspective, because he was a little, the guy that I'm about to mention was a little bit taller and had more weight, but the way he gets after the quarterback, with his physical talent, he reminds me a lot of former Florida State edge rusher Jermaine Johnson, who was just selected as a first-round pick in this past 2022 NFL draft. He really is able to get after the quarterback, as you see with those 28.5 sacks. We'll have to add weight, but as Brian said, adding 15 pounds of muscle would be sustainable for his playing style. From a aspect of the University of Louisville, this makes a lot of sense. Addressing the defensive line, you get a guy like Popeye Williams in the last class. Yaya Diaby is going to be gone likely. You have Ashton Gelati, who's going to be a junior once Jabron is a freshman. So at the very least, it seems like Jabron could be a depth piece to start out, but play for the future. Having meaningful depth while he adds weight. I think year 2 could be huge for Harvey at a respective college program. Look, I think that this move makes too much sense, right? Anytime you're addressing the defensive line, I think that the University of Louisville is continuing to add some more players on the defensive line. They already have a commitment from 4-star edge rusher Adonijah Green, who has risen up a lot through the rankings as well. So adding 2 premier edge rushers would be exactly what the doctor ordered for Scott Satterfield and Mark Ivey, Wesley McGriff, Brian Brown, and the whole defensive coaching staff for the University of Louisville. There's really not much more to analyze here in that respect, because it's not a position that has a ton of competition. Like I mentioned, Yaya Diaby is going to be gone. So you have, a spot open, whether or not that goes to Popeye Williams, Adonijah Green, Jabron Harvey. Regardless, it shows that the versatility, he can play standing up. He can play with his hand in the dirt. So with it seems like the University of Louisville is going to deploy different base packages this upcoming season is kind of the vibe that I'm getting. So we'll kind of know more about how Jabron Harvey could fit into this system when we kind of see what Brian Brown has in mind for the upcoming season. But ultimately, getting some big time depth in at the very least, because I do think you watch the film, Jabron Harvey jumps off of the screen. I think that he is exactly what the doctor ordered here for the University of Louisville. So we talked about 3 football recruits: Nathaniel Ray Joseph, Martel Hight and his decommitment, and also Jabron Harvey and his list cut to 5. Tomorrow will be some more football recruiting news. Raymond Polito, I think I'm saying that wrong. A 5-star in the 2024 class has cut his list to 10. The Cardinals are included, so be sure to look out for that. As always, thanks again for making us your first listen every day. The first picks of the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft have been made. Search now for Ultimate NBA Mock Draft and get over 50 insiders. The Odyssey app, sports experts, the draft experts of Locked On NBA Big Board, and more. The 5-episode Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is underway. Make Ultimate NBA Mock Draft your second listen today. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here